Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me today, I have a Wheeler and a Jer.
Hello.
That's right, keeping you on your toes. I'm switching up the order. That this podcast is brought to you by you. You supported the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Welcome to part 2 of our Midnight Hunt set review. The previous episode, we covered white and blue. Today, we are here to talk about black, red, and green cards. But before we jump into it, Jer, you have something to say real quick.
Yep. Last episode I hecked up. I said if you countered a disturb card, it goes back to the graveyard. That is in fact not correct. If you counter a disturb card, it goes to exile.
Awesome. Now, for our set reviews, a reminder that these are not exhaustive. We're not going to talk about every single card, only the ones that we think are relevant to the format. And there are a bunch of very cool commander cards that they've printed that we are also going to be talking about, again, if they meet our criteria. But let's jump into it, starting with Bloodline Culling. This is a 3-mana instant for 1 black and says choose 1. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn, or creature tokens get -2/-2 until end of turn. Jer.
It's a cool card, but I just don't think it's quite good enough. Like, black has removal such that it doesn't even usually play Dismember, and it has access to an uncountable number of infests, including Infest, that are non-conditional. So I think you'd just rather play a better card. This is a cool split card, but I just don't think it's quite versatile enough to push it in over something that's just better.
Random question. In a combo heavy meta, is because it's an instant and it hits tokens, maybe against like a Splinterton deck, or still way too narrow?
Still way too narrow.
Worth mentioning, but yeah, fair enough.
Because like any instant speed removal spell beats Splinter Twin.
Right. I guess you just kill the target with the -5/-5, not even the token thing. All right.
Yeah. And you could do that for 1 mana in black.
Yeah. Perfect. Let's talk about Champion of the Perished. This is a 1/1 zombie for a single black pip, and says whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Perished. Wheeler.
So this card is going to get very large, and I think it's going to get very large through not just like, hey, I'm playing cards in my deck and these cards are zombies, but also in the like, hey, if I have a sack outlet and a grave crawler, I can repeatedly play this card and just stack it up. And that's kind of cool and good. Not to mention, it doesn't have to be zombies specific to play this card. I'm going to at least give it a shot in Dredge. It is a 1-mana creature for 1 black, so it passes the Hogak test, and that's a deck that also just has a whole bunch of zombies or repeatable ways to put in zombie tokens. So yeah, it's this is a card that like 20 years ago I would have loved to have seen, but I'll take it now. It's not too late.
Next up, we have Gisa. Gisa or Gisa?
Gisa, please.
Gisa. Glorious Resurrector is a 4-mana 4/4 legendary human wizard for 2 black, and reads, if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. And at the beginning of your upkeep, put all creature cards exiled with Gisa onto the battlefield under your control, and they're decayed? Hold on, what? Jer?
Why did you say they're decayed like it's an upside?
Sorry, I just like
Yeah, no, this card's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bonkers. Like, you get the ETBs, which is insane. You get to attack with them, which is insane. They're incentivized like not to trade. Yeah, this card's messed up. It's really, really good. It has 4 toughness, so it's hard to remove. It has 4 power, so it kills your opponent. It costs 4, so it's pretty reasonable to cast. Like, even Ben plays 4-drop sometimes.
Yeah. Hey, Salvagers is a 4-drop.
Yeah, this card's really good. If people you play against often play creatures, I would strongly consider playing it.
So you think of this as more reactive than proactive?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a pretty solid like mid-range card. You want to play it in like a grindy game where like you're using efficient things to kill your things, and this gives you value to pull ahead of your opponent.
It kind of has this thing going for it. I don't know how. I wish I had a really succinct term for it. But it's like, I imagine people are going to compare it to Kalitas as the 4-drop that says, haha, no graveyard for you kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, wouldn't I just rather have the life gain from Kalitas? Because that's reliable. And like, who cares? What if I get their elf or whatever? This is absolutely one of those cards where until you play against it, it's going to be hard to like really grasp it. But then they
Yeah.
steal like any utility idiot creature that you've played, any kind of recruiter or a spell seeker, or even just like an Ice Fang Coatl or whatever. And you're like, oh wow. You know, it's like the Scarab God.
Even like a wood elves, like the first time they steal a wood elves, like that's all I want in life. Like,
yeah, this is the good kind. This is a Jer card, not a Jer card. You know,
yeah, it's no Selvala Explorer returned, but
if it like does a fine job normally, but then if it doesn't get checked and it's in a good matchup, it's like
you just win.
Yeah.
Well, I'm picturing, all right, imagine you're playing Pod.
I'm there.
And what do you rather be playing against, right? This or Kalitas?
Kalitas 18
right?
times.
Yeah,
a
yeah,
week.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like they're both good, but Kalitas is better against aggressive matchups, and this is better in like grindier creature matchups and against combo.
All right, let's talk about a commander card. And well, once we get into it, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think this card has a lot of story to it. Let's talk about Gorex the Tomb Shell. This is an 8-mana 4/4 legendary zombie turtle for 6 black, and says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may exile any number of creature cards from your graveyard. The spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way. It has Death Touch, and whenever it attacks or dies, choose a card at random exiled with Gorex and put it into its owner's hand. First off, Wheeler. Second of all, is this at all related to like some of the other large lumbering turtles, or is this this is a new turtle?
This is just a giant dead turtle.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's still cool, but not as exciting.
Yeah, it's very, very cool in that it's a gigantic zombie turtle that seems to have a tower on its shell.
Full of cannons.
Almost if it is, or a tomb, if you would. It has a tomb on its shell. Thus, the tomb shell.
All right. That is kind of cool.
As for the card itself, this is the kind of card where I'll play it once. I'll hate it, but it's like, okay, no, you know what's even better? It's the kind of card where if it's in my deck and I win the event and I don't see the card, I'll praise it. But if it's in my deck and I don't see the card and I don't win the event, I'm going to be like, I was trying some cute cards. I had this Gorex card in here, because it's kind of neat how gigantic it is, and the fact that you can just consume any old creature from your yard to get it popping. But at the same time, it sounds weird. It's just a 4/4 Death Touch. And the fact that it only triggers on, I mean, attacking is nice, but it triggering on dying is kind of rough, because if it gets Caracased or exiled, then all your beautiful root wallas and other root wallas, they're just lost. They're gone. They're in the aether. And that's kind of sad. So I'm going to say no, but if I happen to fight somebody and I'm playing this in my deck, please don't judge me too harshly.
I look at this and I immediately want to be like, oh, Recurring Nightmare. And then I suddenly realize that it doesn't work at all the way I want it to with Recurring Nightmare, right? Because it's not an ETB.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I mean, and also just Recurring Nightmare is already a messed up card, you know? It's in that category of like, this goes infinite with Intruder Alarm.
Yeah.
Like everything does.
I think this is the Jer wisdom of don't put bad cards in your deck to make your good cards better.
Yes.
All right. Moving on. We have Graveyard Trespasser. This is a 3-mana 3/3 human werewolf for 2 and a black. Has Ward, discard a card. Amazing. And whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. And it's a werewolf, so it has Daybound. And on the Nightbound side, it's a 4/4. Ward, discard a card. And whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 2 cards from graveyards. Each creature card exiled this way, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Jer.
This card reminds me a lot of Gorge Scavenger from Ixalan. That card's pretty good. I played it some of the time. Although I think it's Death Gorge Scavenger gets an advantage because it's a green 3-drop, so really it's a 2-drop. And this is a black 3-drop, so
Yeah.
it's a 3-drop. And the backside is just kind of underwhelming. It's like mostly just the same card. Like it doesn't get combat ability or protection or anything. All it does is it gets one more power and toughness and exiles one more card. Overall, I think it's going to be like an 110th card a lot of the time. Like it's just not quite gonna do enough. It's pretty good. It's not bad, but it's just not really good, you know.
Right on. Let's talk about Infernal Grasp. This is a 2-mana instant for 1 and a black and reads, destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. Jer.
This card's really good. It's going to see lots and lots of play, especially in lower curve, more aggressive decks, and a lot more people are experimenting with Death Shadow, and I forget the name of the other Death Shadow, Infernal Scourge.
Scourge of the Skyclaves.
All right, and I had Infernal on the brain. But yeah, it was a Scourge of some sort. Yeah, people are playing those cards more, so they're kind of looking to lose incidental life. Like incidental life loss has some value in those decks. Yeah, and just the fact that it just kills the thing. It's you just point it and it's dead. It's nice. It's not non-artifact. It's not non-black. It's not like pick 3 arbitrary creature types and doesn't kill those. just kills them all.
Good clean magic, right?
Precisely.
It feels like and I mean this in the nicest way possible, like the highest performing level of like Robo Rosewater being like, kill a thing and you lose 2. It's like, yep, great. that could exist. It doesn't exist yet? Great. Let's make it. The end.
All right. Let's talk about Jadar, Ghoul Caller of Nephalia. This is a 2-mana 1/1 legendary human wizard for 1 and a black, and reads, at the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. Wheeler.
Well, I don't know if it's exactly Ophiomancer, mostly because it's not making Death Touch snakes, but it is a 2-mana creature that is pumping out a fresh body every single one of your turns, and it's easy to cast. I'm going to give this a shot personally I think I set up my own trap and then walked into it. I think this card will see play in Aristocrats is what I was leading to. Or it's worth a shot. And also zombies.deck, because this is a good 2-drop.
Is it good with Champion of the Perished?
Yeah.
If so, why?
Well, you get a zombie every turn, and thankfully you don't give a care about dying, and the end.
Nice, good story.
Yeah, that's the story of zombies.
Cool. Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's a card that might be a little bit less straightforward. We got Jaren the Corrupted Bishop. This is a 3-mana 2/3 legendary human cleric for 2 and a black. When it enters the battlefield or another non-token human you control dies, lose a life and create a 1/1 white human creature token. And then activated ability 2, target human you control gains lifelink until end of turn. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you have exactly 13 life and 6 open mana, you may transform Jaren. And on the backside, Ormondal the Corruptor is a legendary 6/6 flying trample lifelink demon with the text, sack a creature, draw a card. Jer.
So I'm looking at this card as though the last ability doesn't exist and it doesn't have a backside. And I think it sees play in exactly humans and clerics, if you want to give homage to clerics. Yeah, I just think there's too many hoops and mana and hoops to acknowledge the backside with more than a cursory glance. But the other 2 abilities are pretty nice in a human deck. You get to make a bunch of creatures. It's kind of annoying for them to kill your other humans. Your other humans are likely better than this card, so they'll want to kill them first. And the activated ability is really good in the aggro matchup, which is nice.
I thought you were going to be lower on this card.
I mean, I am pretty low on it. I said it goes in like a pretty niche deck and a deck that doesn't exist.
Whoa, okay. All right, hold on.
Apologies to any of the human tribal players in the audience.
Thank you, Serge.
No, that was clerics. You thought I was saying humans doesn't exist?
I mean, you couldn't possibly be saying that cleric clan friar works. Oh, shoot. What was the name? Oh, yeah. Tell him, Serge.
Yeah, grr. Moving on. We got the Meat Hook Massacre. This is a legendary enchantment for X black black. When it enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you gain a life.
This is a pretty good sweeper. Yeah, I mean, black control decks, especially if they're not playing white, are probably interested in this one. This is definitely more appealing to me than Black Sun Zenith, even though Black Sun Zenith puts counters on it. The fact that you can wrath the board and gain a bunch of life to put you out of range, or if you have like a bunch of planeswalkers in play, a bunch of tokens, you could potentially use it as like a pseudo fireball to fireball out your opponent. This is a really interesting tool for I think tap out control decks are going to be more interested in this. Ones that are like more interested in playing to the board, play a lot of planeswalkers, like kind of like the rock style decks. Like sometimes they just jam up the board with planeswalkers, make like 2 creatures a turn, create a really large board stall, and then they can just present this to the stack and be like, you're gonna die if it resolves. So I think it's a good tool for those decks.
This might be a little too niche, but it does have the Blood Artist. Whenever a creature you control dies, something good happens for you. Is that worth or probably not?
I don't think you want to put something like this into your deck in Aristocrats, just because there's so many better like there are so many creatures that are free sack outlets. You don't play them all. You'd much rather just play one of those and be able to control exactly when to sacrifice your creatures and when not to. And you also often don't want to kill all your creatures at once. That's often quite bad. You want to leave some around, and this doesn't give you that opportunity. So I think this does not go into Aristocrats.
Shocking. Next up, we have the Morbid Opportunist. This is a 3-mana 1/3 human rogue for 2 and a black. Whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, though. Jer, I'm throwing to you again.
Well, this one does go into Aristocrats. It's not quite as good as the morph creature. I forget the name of it. It starts with a G.
Grim Haruspex.
That's the one. Yeah, but I think this one's still good enough. Having 3 toughness is pretty appealing. And you're off, like as I mentioned, you often don't want to like sack your board all at once anyways. And it's a really nice draw engine if you can keep it in play. So yeah, I think this is going to be worthwhile to at least test out in certain metas if you're not playing against a ton of control decks with spot removal. Then I think this could be a really useful tool for Aristocrats just to get an engine going.
So an interesting thing, I just looked up Grim Haruspex, and it says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. So Grim Haruspex has this ability to draw you a number of cards, but only non-token and only you control. Morbid Opportunist has this interesting flexibility or play pattern where it triggers off of your opponent's creatures dying as well. So it limits the ceiling, but it has potentially some other options too. I kind of like that flexibility.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to come up too much in our format because I'm not sure there's decks that are willing to pay 3 mana for that ability when they're planning to kill their opponent's creatures without the ability to just like have free sack outlets and get the engine going that way. I don't know. Can you think of anything, Ben, that would want that effect? For I'm gonna lightning bolt all your creatures and turn all my bolts into draw a card.
No, I think I'm good. I think that
Mardu 2 for 1.
well, the biggest thing with decks that are going to play, I mean, Aristocrats as a whole, right, is that you are playing like nothing but garbage cards. Like your deck is just filled with garbage cards that work together and filled with, some of those garbage cards allow you to manipulate whereabouts your other garbage cards are. Are they in play? Are they going to the graveyard? Are they going back to your hand from the graveyard? Are they dying? Are they, yada, yada, yada. But you ultimately, at the end of it, you're in control over everything. And that's great. That's what you want. That's your game plan, so you get to always have that going. And you can like get that kind of with Morbid Opportunist, but not to the same level as the like Midnight Reapers, the Grim Harvespexes we already have. And I don't know how often, I don't know if it's worthwhile factoring, an unreliable kill on your opponent's creatures. Like it's not what the deck's kind of looking to do.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's it.
I cut you off so suddenly there.
No, it's fine. I was kind of meandering, but basically, yeah, it's just you already have cards that let you be in full control multiple times, which is great because it keeps the flow going. Whereas this one feels a bit too mid-rangey, but it's underpowered for a mid-range shell.
I like it. Let's talk about another commander card. We have the Prowling Geistcatcher. This is a 4-mana 2/4 human rogue for 3 and a black. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile it. If that creature was a token, put a +1/+1 counter on Prowling Geistcatcher. And then, when Prowling Geistcatcher leaves the battlefield, return each card exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. Wheeler.
So this one, it feels weird because, spoiler alert, we recorded a episode earlier for White and Blue. Sorry to give a peek behind the curtain, but so I forget its name, Moorland something or other. Basically another white card from the commander set that was like, oh, this might be good in Sandy B.
Moorland Rescuer.
There you go, thank you. And I hinted towards an even better card. Here's the better card, as in the actually good card. I think this card is quite good. This is an actual factual combo outlet with Sandy B, in that it has the right mana cost, being at 4, so you can have it fill the role of, oh god, what's it called? Body Snatcher. There's an Urza's Saga 4-drop reanimator that usually gets the chain started, but it also can kind of play a backup reanimation piece that's a bit cheaper. But this card just lets you pop off. It lets you combo kill when you're actually using your combo kill, but it also just kind of lets you play fair. It's pretty easy to set up either a loop or some kind of value engine with this card.
2 power.
Yeah. 2 power is pretty relevant. There's a card called Revelark.
Oh.
It kind of gets the whole deck going.
Does it get the whole deck going, or is it like the NOS button on the deck?
It's kind of like plot armor. Like, no matter what you do to me, I have this Revelark. And you can't really disrupt the Revelark. Because even when you try to disrupt Revel, you're just playing into my plan. It's like, joke's on you. I was already killing this idiot.
You wasted a card, you fool.
You fool. So yeah, this one I'm actually really excited about. I mean, there have been cards, over the years that help, that you could slide into Sandy B if you were looking to be more mid-rangey or more combo-oriented, but this one is just kind of perfect. It's easy to cast, it survives Bolt, it's got 2 power or less.
It's not a legend, which is very relevant.
Yeah, and the wording on it, like just when you sacrifice it, when it leaves play, meaning you can just ephemerate with this card. Like, you can literally set up combos using Ephemerate and Eternal Witness in this card. Like, that's huge. That's like a dimension that this deck didn't previously have. So yeah, pretty excited about this one.
And the final card we're going to talk about in black today is Tainted Adversary. This is a 2-mana 2/3 zombie with Death Touch for 1 and a black, and says when it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 and a black any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on Tainted Adversary, then create twice that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed. Wheeler.
So this is all, again, really pushing just how badly mono black, or sorry, not mono black. Well, I mean, for a while mono black, but how badly zombies would have taken any reasonable to good 2-drop. Like, if this was just a 2-mana 2/3 zombie with Death Touch that at its mana cost, like, I might be like, well, it eats up a lot of things, huh? But then it has this beautiful little added ability, because you might just play this as a 2-mana 2/3 with Death Touch that, is probably going to get buffed by a Lord or 2, or might have enough toughness, so you'll have to, throw a bunch of blockers at it, whatever it may be. But it also just has that mana sink ability, so that if you draw it late, you're going to get a mini army to let you kind of just slide in with your Build-A-Grave Titan.
Oh, God.
Yep.
You know what this reminds me of? What is the 4-mana 4/5 that brings its own army if you're in late game 2?
The 4-mana 4/5.
2 and black for a 4/5, and it's got kicker for like 6.
Oh, Josu Vess?
Josu!
Yeah. What if we took Josu Vess and made it playable?
Half off.
Yeah,
Right
exactly.
now. You like Josu Vess, if you call in right now, 50% off. The stats, the costs.
And we've even figured out how to make it so you won't get goozled by Caracas.
Oh!
But again, its ability is worded in such a way that if you Aether Vial it out, you can then dump your mana into it. It's at a mana cost where you can play it off Luris. You can get it back with any number of Unearth style effects. Yeah, I think this card's pretty good. And even outside of zombies, like, I'll play this in like a mono black aggro deck. Like, it just 2/3 Death Touch is pretty reasonable. It's weird to say, but like, often the worst part of about Gifted Aetherborn is that it has Death Touch. I mean, Lifelink's annoying, but the Death Touch is what really it just makes it a pisser, you know?
The fact that this doesn't cost black is incredible.
Yep.
Yeah.
No more. Yeah, you don't have to be embarrassed if you are playing a mono black deck and you have a Mishra's Factory on turn 2.
You're like, ah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the red cards, and let's just start with the red adversary, the Bloodthirsty Adversary. 2-mana 2/2 Hasty Vampire for 1 and a red, and then has the ability multi-whatever kicker, 2 and a red, enters with that many +1/+1 counters, then exile up to that many instant and/or sorcery cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them. You may cast any number of those copies without paying their mana cost. Wheeler.
Serge, I would have probably played this if it was a Valley Dasher that could block. Actually, that's probably not true. It's 2021. But you know what the most relevant part about Ash Zealot is, Serge?
What's that?
It's the haste. I mean, the first strike's actually probably very close. But the fact that it's just, again, an easy to cast, cheap haste threat that when you put more mana into it, then you're going to get to free Lightning Strike, Volcanic Hammer, whatnot from the yard. Makes me tempted to play this one mostly in medium red. It's hard to say, like, my brain is so poisoned by turbo mono red that anytime I see a card where it's like, oh, I might have to pay more than 2 mana, I can't deal with that.
I am curious about this card. Like, is this an RDW card?
Yeah, I just don't know. Like, that deck doesn't need new cards. That's just, it's a bit of a weird thing to say, but like, that deck's already just kind of perfect.
Sure. All right. Is this a like blue-red spells card?
No.
Really?
I think you're just looking to play it in a deck that wants a beep beep that also has like a Soul Ring or a Mana Crypt going on, or vampires.
I think this probably gets into red, or at least the latest version I saw Greg post. It probably kicks something out. Like, it's not a huge upgrade, but
yeah,
it's like a minor upgrade.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean, where it's just like, there's really not much more that you need to do to that deck. And it could, by an upgrade, like, if this does find a home in red, like, how many more games out of, like, on average out of 100 do you think it's going to win for you in place of what it would be replacing?
Between 0.2 and 0.5.
And hey, well, we take those.
Yeah, I mean, if that's an improvement, I mean, that's not bad.
Yep, min-max Surge, we call them.
Yeah. All right, next up, we have the Cathartic Pyre. This is a 2-mana instant for 1 and a red, and it's a new modal spell. Ooh. Choose 1. 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker, or discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many. Jer.
I love it. I love everything about this card. Single red pip or planeswalker, draw that many cards. It's all good. Yeah, this card's really good. Goes in many, like, all the red decks that are willing to play burn spells that don't say target player.
Yeah. That's oddly specific, but I know exactly what you're talking about, and I love it.
Yeah. You're jamming this in medium red, right, Ben?
Again, that deck's perfect. I don't
all right.
know. I mean, like maybe.
Maybe if it costs 2 in a red.
I do think a braid is worse isn't the right word, but like less necessary than it's ever been. You know, like there are just so many cards that that just randomly have a third mode that's disenchant on it.
Yeah.
And so I think like there's a chance that like the added hitting planeswalkers is pretty big, and being able to throw out your other stuff like extra lands or whatnot, sure. But similarly, like the bloodthirsty adversary, it's like such a small minor upgrade that it's really hard to tell.
Next up, we have the Falconwrath Pitfighter. This is a 1-mana 2/1 vampire warrior for a single red pip. Activated ability 1 and a red, and discard a card and sack a vampire. That's a lot of hoops. Draw 2 cards. Oh my god. Activate only if an opponent lost life this turn. Hold on. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 costs. Wheeler.
Serge, are you familiar with Falconwrath, George?
Go on. You have my attention.
Well, there's a card called Falconwrath Gorger, but that's a typo. It's Falconwrath George. And Falconwrath George is 1 red for a 2/1 vampire that says each vampire creature you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. And the madness cost is equal to its mana cost. Serge, I'm here to help any red players that are playing this card, any red-black players that are playing this card. Please remember that you might have to discard a vampire and it has madness. Thank you. James, can we get the golf clap playing, please? Or Jordan, whomever I have to beg. The point is, this is a 1-mana 2/1 with no downside. Like, red players still will occasionally play Jackal Pup, say it's wrong, and then keep playing it.
Well, they'll also keep winning, so.
Yeah. Timeout. Bloodthirsty Adversary, 2-mana 2/2 with haste and nothing but upside. Maybe not. Falconwrath Pitfighter, a card that takes an entire paragraph to accomplish absolutely nothing. Ooh, this is an upgrade.
Serge, ask Ben how many lands he's currently playing in his red deck wins deck.
Hey, I'm at my last red build was at like 28 or something.
I don't believe you.
It's up there. It's healthy. Well,
that's 5 more than I was expecting.
here's a different riddle me this. How much more is 2 than 1?
Like 3.5 times?
Exactly. Twice as much. 2 mana is twice as much mana as 1 mana. And that's a big deal. Like any 2-drop can deal damage. But if you have a 1-drop that is dealing 2 damage and that has a relevant ability, or like no ability at all, at least something that isn't a downside, you're good to go. And who knows, this one might be a downside. Like you can cash this card in. You can just cash it in itself for extra value.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Discard a land, sack your irrelevant 1-drop, draw 2 burn spells.
Discard your Fiery Temper. Ooh.
Next up, we have the Moonveil Regent. This is a 4-mana 4/4 dragon for 3 and a red. Has flying, and says whenever you cast a spell, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw a card for each of that spell's colors. And then there's a second ability. When the dragon dies, it deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of colors amongst permanents that you control. Jer.
The bar for dragons is really high, and I just don't think this one's quite got the hops to get over it. The first ability you can like kind of do some shenanigans with. Like it's obviously good if you have no cards in hand. Then even if you cast a card with 1 color, you get to draw a card. That's kind of nice. I think the second ability is like largely irrelevant. Like in most decks, you can't reliably deal more than 2 or 3, and that's kind of if everything's going well. Like most of the time when this dies, I imagine everything is dying, and then you likely have nothing. So yeah, I think this card just likely isn't gonna cut it.
All right, next up we have Play with Fire. This is a 1-mana instant for a single red pip and says Play with Fire deals 2 damage to any target. If a player is dealt damage this way, scry 1. Wheeler.
What if we made a shock that was, I'm going to say it. Actually, let me make a call.
Don't do it.
What's that term insufferable Magic players use in comments? Strictly better.
No!
Got it.
I'm gonna argue the other side. This
Oh.
card is not strictly better because it will entice people to shock people's faces to get the quote unquote value of scrying one when they shouldn't. I think this card is gonna cause people who cast it to misplay.
Oh, this is the devil's shock. This is the monkey's paw shock.
But Jer, you and I know that misplaying has never caused red players to lose matches or tournaments. Like,
They're going to go turn one, shock you, and then have a big smirk on their face when they find the second land.
oh, that's the worst part. Anytime I'm against a red player who just goes like land shock to the dome pass. And I don't know, like, I don't know them. They're just someone I've never played before. I can smell death around the corner. Like, I will die. But yeah.
I think our evaluation of this card is perfect now, right?
Well, let me just clarify. Don't give me any galvanic blast shenanigans. I played more artifacts in one deck than some of you youngsters have played in your whole gosh darn life. And two, if anybody brings up Wild Slash, you've never hit Ferocious. You've never hit Ferocious.
That's just a myth, man. That ain't real. Yeah.
Yeah, that ain't real. Fate Reforged was never printed.
Never happened. It's all in your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Mandela, man.
This card, it's pretty good. I will play it in decks where I am playing shocks.
Next up, we have Reckless Storm Seeker. This is a 3-mana 2/3 human werewolf for 2 and a red, and says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. And since it's a werewolf, it has daybound, which means it has a nightbound side. Meet Storm Charged Slasher. This is a 3/4 and says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains +2/+0, gains trample, and gains haste until end of turn. Wheeler, what do you think?
I can't think of a better card to encapsulate medium red. Like, my tinfoil hat is that they designed this with medium red in mind. Because it's just perfect. It has, I'm doing the hands thing, Ancient Tomb mana. It has like the default version of, oh, I'm going to target myself. So it's a 3-mana 3/3 with haste, that's bread and butter, old school medium red. And then it just flips into something massive that gives, well, your other massive idiots trample and haste. And you can always just default targeting itself. I think this card is very good.
But don't all your 4-drops already have haste?
This is not all of my 4s. Besides,
right.
some of them might not have trample. Have you ever wanted to give your Hell Rider trample?
All right, I stand corrected.
Yeah, I also think this card's quite good for like Gruul mid-range-ish decks, like the Gruul decks that are looking to play like, you know, like a Mox Crypt spread that have elves and, you know, cards like this to then buff their elves or buff itself, get it out quick, kill them dead. Like curving this into like, I don't know, some random Garrick to poop out a token to give the token haste is pretty spicy. Yeah, I foresee this card killing a lot of people. A lot of people.
The final red card we're going to talk about today is the Smoldering Egg. This is a 2-mana 0/4 dragon egg for 1 and a red. Has Defender, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a number of ember counters on the egg equal to the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. Then, if the egg has 7 or more ember counters on it, remove them and transform egg into Ashmouth Dragon. This is a 4/4 flying dragon that reads, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, deal 2 damage to any target. Wheeler.
Big fan, Serge. Big fan. Thing in the Ice is wait, hold on. This isn't an egg pun at all. Thing in the Ice is pretty good. Look, it doesn't die to bolt. It transforms relatively quickly when you need it to. I think a lot quicker than it looks. Like, this is the kind of card where you look at it and you're like, but Lightning Bolt's only 1 mana. But remember, there are spells that cost 2 mana, which is twice as much as 1. So, I mean, you're turboing through it.
Yeah, we covered that earlier. Yeah.
Exactly. God forbid you cast a Factor Fiction. And then all of a sudden, boom, you've got Dragon. And it's kind of nice because you have a little bit more control when you do flip it. Sometimes Thing in the Ice can be a little bit awkward when you're like, well, I really need to counter their spell, but it's super awkward that I have to bounce my board. But this one, you get a little bit more flexibility in when you actually want to counter it. Mind you, given that the flip side is just all gas all the time, you're kind of incentivized to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and you just always want to flip this thing, unlike Thing in the Ice. Like, you just want to get to Dragon as fast as possible.
Yeah, and when you get to Dragon as fast as possible, congratulations. This card's just going to kill your opponent so quickly. Like, do you know how many people to this day still try to play Gutter Snipe in like blue-red?
Guilty.
It's like,
Oh, you just called out so many people. You just subtweeted like half the Magic community. Like
I'm punchy tonight. I'm punchy. And so the problem with Gutter Snipe is that, you know, it dies to any Galvanic Blast or Wild Slash, no matter, even if you don't have Metalcraft or Ferocious. But when the Gutter Snipe doesn't die, you die very quickly. And so what if this Gutter Snipe flew, didn't die to Bolt, and also just targeted whatever it pleased? Yeah, I think this card's pretty strong. I look forward to playing it. And I think you'll probably see a lot of blue-red players, maybe even some mono-red players giving it a shot. The Thermo Alchemist mono-red players, you know?
Let's move on to green. Let's start with probably one of my favorite cards in Midnight Haunt. That is the Augur of Autumn. This is a 3-mana 2/3 human druid for 1 green, and says you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands from the top of your library, and if you have Coven, so as long as you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Share.
This card is a druid. It goes in druids. This card's pretty cool. A lot of people are comparing it to Courser Crewfix because it does kind of similar things, but is enough different that you're probably just going to play them both because they're both good. But this card's definitely worse against aggressive decks, better against mid-rangey slash control decks. The fact that it's better at generating you card advantage is going to be nice for a certain subset of decks, and the fact that it doesn't gain you life is going to be worse for a different subset of decks. So yeah, but overall I think the card is quite good.
It's going to feel very good to not have this die to Rex Sage.
But it will die to Bolt and Volcanic Hammer.
Look, I can dream. All right, let's move on. Briar Bridge Tracker is a 3-mana 2/3 human scout for 2 and a green. Has vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, investigate. So make a clue token. And then, as long as you control a token, it gets +2/+0. So it's a 3-mana 4/3. Jer.
I actually think this card's pretty good, especially for like more stompier, less colors decks. 4/3 vigilance for 3 is pretty reasonable, and the fact that it's going to draw you a card at some point later on in the game is also very enticing. And I think that's just a good enough package to warrant a slot in some of the decks that like aren't delving into all of the colors.
Next up, we have Consuming Bob.
Consuming Bob?
Consuming Bob. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Thought it was more of a goif myself, but go on.
5 mana star +1 ooze for 3/3, 3 green. Bob's power is equal to the number of card types among cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. And then at the beginning of your end step, create a green ooze creature token with this creature's power is equal the same thing. The same thing. It's a Bob that makes you more Bobs. Jer.
But those Bobs don't make you more Bobs.
Right. Only
Yeah.
OG Bob makes more Bobs. It's not self-replicating.
This is so confusing.
This card is hard.
No, I just mean calling it Bob. Yeah, it's a Tarmogoyf ooze that poops out oozes that have P and T like Tarmogoyf, but only for your graveyard.
Yeah, it's a lot like Biogenic Ooze, except they start bigger, but they don't grow infinitely. I could see this card being good, and like I'd probably play it in the Blink deck. I don't know.
Huh. Why the Blink deck specifically?
You just have lots of ways to save it, and it's sort of like a build army in a can type creature. So you have, well, it doesn't have an ETB. It's like a really high value creature, and that deck loves 5-drops, so it's a 5-drop. So why not?
All right. Next up, we have the Contortionist Troop. This is a 0/0 human for X and a green. When it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, and Coven at the beginning of your end step if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Wheeler.
Well, the counters deck itself is pretty good at manipulating its power and toughness of, well, any given creature that it's playing. You can play this at any stage of the game. And even if it starts out as a 1/1, it's probably going to get pretty big pretty quick just by the nature of your deck. And yeah, that's pretty it. It's a very clean magic card that kind of does what you would want it to do. And I don't think it takes that much work to get it going. And considering what kind of deck you are, you probably have ways to make it so that it's more than one +1/+1 counter, or that even if it is just one counter getting put on, it's going to do just a little something extra.
Very clean. Next up, we have a tiny little mushroom friend, the Death Bonnet Sprout. 1 mana 1/1 fungus for a single green pip. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. Then, if there are 3 or more creature cards in your graveyard, transform the Death Bonnet Sprout into Death Bonnet Hulk. This is a 3/3 fungus horror, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on the Hulk. Wheeler.
This is another 1-drop that you can cast Hogak with. And if you get it early, it is going to start filling up your graveyard full of dredgers or little fun tools that you may have, an anger or whatever it may be. But then once you get it going, the fact that it can start eating away at your opponent's graveyard is kind of the biggest thing. You look at it and you would assume that it could only eat from your yard. But no, you just get to play, once a turn free Scooz activation while making it bigger if it is a creature. And if your opponent's got nothing you want to deal with, you might have a couple of extra garbage can, dredgers or utility cards that you want to nibble away at.
Yeah. Now, my biggest complaint with this card is the way it's templated. You can never transform it the turn you play it. You always have to go a full turn cycle through.
Yeah, you do. That is a downside to it. You do have to give the full cycle. And in the end, it is just a 1 mana 1/1. But in a deck that is playing, basking root wallas and blazing root wallas and grave crawlers and whatnot, you're not exactly a stranger to just playing just a little baby idiot, especially when that little baby idiot on the turn it comes into play might just be there to trigger Vengevine or bring back a Hogak.
All right, next up, we have the Dryad's Revival. This is a 3 mana sorcery for 2 and a green, and says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. And then it has Flashback for 4 and a green. Jer.
I really like this card. Its most obvious home to me is in Scapeshift. But I've also started brewing up High Tide decks with different splashes, and I think green is definitely one of the viable splashes. So if you ever want to play blue-green High Tide again, this card definitely gets in there.
Crack open that hunting pack.
Yeah.
Is there a specific strategy that having Flashback enables with Dryad's Revival that makes it different from Regrowth, or do you just like being able to ramp up with something like High Tide because you can cast it twice?
It's a lot better when you have cards like Intuition and Gifts Ungiven in your deck, because especially with Intuition, if you put this in the stack, then you're guaranteeing yourself getting both the other cards you put in, whereas with most other cards, I guess you're getting...
Yeah, you get the one, right? Yeah.
You're getting one with Intuition. It's not as good with Gifts Ungiven, but it's still nice. Yeah, and especially with High Tide, casting High Tide as many times as you can is often enables you to be able to go off earlier if your hand is very good. And with Scapeshift, just having more recursion is often very nice because you're sort of all in on the one card. So if it gets discarded or it gets countered, it's nice to be able to have like more recursion is better essentially. And so having sort of like 2 pieces in one card allows you to be sort of more cavalier with how you play the game if you have access to this.
Right on. All right, next up we have the Outland Liberator. This is a 2 mana 2 for 1 and a green. It's a human werewolf and has an activated ability 1 and sacrifice it to destroy target enchantment or artifact. But since it's a werewolf, it has another side. On the opposite side, it's a 3/3, has 1 and sack it to disenchant, so destroy target artifact or enchantment. But it also reads, whenever it attacks, destroy a target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. Not even on connect, just on attack. Wheeler.
So this card, I was actually talking to the titular, the namesake of Blue-Green Tempo, of Sorensen Tempo, Robin Sorensen himself, about this card. And the reviews are in. He said it was, and I quote, pretty good. And you know what? That's enough of a selling point for me.
We had Sorensen on the line. He said, shrugged his shoulders. Inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, the new flipping Bosley seems pretty good. And I that's kind of where I was at. It does kind of like a Kasali Pride Mage impression, although you don't have to play green-white. Now, for some people, that's not a bad thing.
Hey.
I don't know why I'm going in for some weird dig. Flipping it isn't that difficult in something like Blue-Green Tempo, or even in, you know, a green-white deck or whatnot, but green-white probably has the redundancy for this kind of effect, and it does a reasonable thing. Like when it flips, getting the, I was going to call it a Trigon Predator, but you don't even have to hit them.
Yeah.
Just on attack, getting to disenchant, that's baby Kogla stuff right there. And then cashing it in when you really need to just blow up anything. This card is really annoying. It's really annoying if you're looking to do anything with artifacts over a period of time without feeling like it's too narrow, you know, something that collector oof might struggle with at times. So yeah, I think this card's pretty solid, and in the words of Robin Sorensen, pretty good.
All right, time to talk about our final card in the adversary cycle, the green one, the Primal Adversary. This is a 3-mana 4/3 wolf for 2 and a green, has trample. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a green any number of times. When you pay it 1 or more times, put that many +1/+1 counters on it, and then up to that many target lands you control become 3/3 wolf creatures with haste that are still lands. Now, notably, it doesn't untap those lands, but still, they're now wolves. What do you think, Jer?
It also doesn't say until end of turn, which is something that I missed the first time I read it.
I missed that too.
Which is kind of exciting. It's like in the certain matchup, just making excess lands 3/3s, especially if you're casting this for 2 or more, is probably something you're in the market for. And yeah, 3/3s are no joke. Keep making this bigger when it has trample is also no joke. Even just a 3-mana 4/3 trampler in green is like pretty good. So yeah, this card's gonna beat down some folks.
Next up, we have Sareth the Viper's Fang. This is a legendary 4-mana 3/4 human warlock for 2 and a green. Says other tapped creatures you control have death touch. Other untapped creatures you control have hexproof. And 1 and tap, untap another target creature or land that you control. Jer.
So this card's kind of cool. I think it's a little too kind of tricky to see a bunch of play, but if you're really interested in protecting some of your other creatures that aren't interested in attacking, it can be useful for that. It can also make your kind of like pseudo beatdown plan better because it makes it harder to block your creatures, and it has the ability to save creatures by untapping them. The fact that it doesn't have any protection itself, and it's got 4 toughness, but it's not going to really get into combat all that often. I don't know how much play it's going to see. I don't really know where I'd play it. In my head, it's going in some like kind of like hybrid creature combo mid-range deck, but I don't know how much you want to be doing that these days. So yeah, I'm sort of on the fence on this one.
It's kind of nice that it untaps Gaia's Cradle or Raphellos.
Oh, that's true.
Or like stopping your Priest of Titania or whatever. It might be a bit too late. I mean, it is a 4-drop, but even then, like considering, you know, how a Llanowar Tribe, that kind of card, we're seeing more Circle of the Dreams Druid, like more expensive, but ultimately, if you get to untap with them, you win the game kind of mana dorks.
Yeah, so you're saying maybe in Huff?
Yeah, like that deck always has been a little weird with its 4-drops. Like almost famously, it just the best 4-drop in that deck for so long was Thrun or like Huntmaster of the Fells.
Xenagos.
Yeah. I'm like Planeswalk, like you didn't have a good 4-drop creature.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of changed, which is really appealing because then you get to, you know, potentially run Eldritch Evolution and you have a thing to evo into Primeval Titan. And so anytime you have a new 4, it's at least worth kind of looking at. Not to mention with more people playing fork bolts and spot removal in place of board wipes, it's kind of appealing to just be able to sit on your creatures and have them have hexproof for quite some time. And then, if you do have to tap them for mana, which, spoiler alert, you probably will, being able to untap or even just take advantage of like a Quirion Ranger or a Quirion Dryad. Quirion Ranger or Scrib Ranger to save it is kind of appealing.
Neat. Sorry, great insight for me. It's just fascinating though, hearing like the two very different perspectives from the two of you, and then my brain is just sitting there spinning, and it's like, brain.
Yeah, I didn't take it as like a dismissal thing. It was just very caught me off guard. Oh, very good.
All right, let's talk about Willowgeist. This is a 1-mana 1/1 tree folk spirit for a single green pip. It has trample, and whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on the Willowgeist. And when Willowgeist dies, you gain life equal to its power. Wheeler.
I think this card is likely to have a home. I hate to mention Dredge so much because, people are probably sick and tired of it, but this one's actually good. Like that's the little mushroom. If we didn't talk about it, you'd get a whole bunch of angry people in the comments. Some of them they don't even play Magic. They're just upset that I talked smack over a very cute little mushroom. But this one can get very big very quickly. Still passes the I can cast Hogak and bring back Vengevine test. Trample's huge. And even though it does say one or more, so many cards that help remove stuff from the graveyard are, repeatable, or you won't feel like you're getting cheated out of additional counters, if that makes sense. Like it's not the whole like if you gain one or more life, put one counter on, where you're like, oh, but I gained 3 life. Usually the removal effects are either everything's gone or you get to chip and get the most out of your Willowgeist. It's also a tree folk.
And a spirit.
Oh, God. Gosh, yeah.
The final card we're going to talk about in our episode today is Ranon 7. Ranon 7 is a planeswalker, enters with 5 loyalty for 5 mana, 3 green, and has 4 abilities. +1, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all land cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. 0, put any number of lands from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. -3, create a green tree folk creature token with reach, and this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. And -8, return all permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand, and you get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size. Now, cool thing about the -8 is Ranon 7 will return to your hand if it dies when you use that ability, which I didn't think of the first time until somebody did that to me in Limited, and I said, oh.
That's always the best, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're just like, you lose to something and you're like, hey, wait, I should do that.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw this one to me because 10,000 years ago, when we were doing the original Modern Horizons, I was talking about Ranon 6, and I said that card was kind of boring and probably wouldn't see much play.
How did that take age?
Not good. And to both of your credits, you both looked at me like I was an idiot, and you're like,
this is the best planeswalker they've ever printed?
Yeah, and I was like, it's 1 damage. How much could it possibly do?
But it's only 2 mana.
It's returning a land, Serge.
And 3 is at least twice as much as 2.
Yeah. All right. So Ranon 7 is not as good as Ranon 6. All right, good. No one's booing me.
I concur. Right. I concur.
It's fun. I mean, it has 4 abilities. This is good and exciting. It protects itself. It makes a very large tree. My worry is it's a 5-drop. And that seems to be a big dividing line with a lot of folks as to what kind of power level you want to have from this. And just making a large creature that doesn't have trample or any type of evasion doesn't really help you close the game like you want your 5-drop to do. That being said, I'll probably play this in lands, at least for a little bit.
Serge, may I?
Oh, by all means.
As someone that has similarly made some heinous calls on cards, hangerback walker, not exactly a Canlander all-star, and sure, I misread the last line where you could tap to add additional counters, but I was wrong nonetheless. Jace Vryn's Prodigy thought that card would only be in Reanimator. We all make mistakes. Of course, all those VODs are deleted by now, so that's okay. But what I'm getting at is that when I see a mythic rare planeswalker like this, and I look at, say, like an Arena deck lists website, or like like MTG Goldfish, even if it's standard or historic or whatever, when I see that smug face, the smug artwork on a mythic rare just plastered across every single deck in the metagame, I'm inclined to believe it's going to kill people.
You think, is Ren and 7th making that much of a splash? Am I wrong about another Ren Planeswalker?
I think this card's really good.
Really good or just good?
I'm willing to say very good.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Yeah, I think you don't even necessarily need to be like an all-in lands deck. I think this is pretty great in the lands like mid-rangey decks. I think that you can play this in like a deck with like a kind of landsy sub-theme. You don't need to be very in on lands for this card to be good. Like coming in -3, making a 5/5 with reach is like quite strong.
But my question is, why wouldn't you just play other better 5-drops like Nissa, who shakes the world? My issue is not that this card is good. I just don't think it's like...
But Nissa requires you to have, like, she makes the 3/3 every turn, which is very good, and doubles your mana. But you need to have, like, more bigger things to do for her.
Right, that's why Nissa's so powerful, yeah.
So she's, like, kind of an enabler, but this card's, like, an engine and a top end and recursion and an enabler.
So time out a second. Did I throw Ren and 7 to myself to redeem myself for getting Ren and 6 wrong, only to set myself up for failure again?
I mean, only time will tell. But
Yeah, right. I don't think, I mean, this is not as big as a blunder.
No. Being like kind of lukewarm on this card is certainly not as bad as this card won't see any play for Ren and 6. But
having a content creator provide a reserved take on a new Magic card is actually very refreshing. So never apologize for that. But you still need to apologize for Ren and 6.
Yeah, where people are literally splashing red in like 3-color decks solely to play Ren and 6.
Yeah, they're like blue-white control, splashing red-blue for Ren and 6, yeah.
It's one of the best planeswalkers for Academy.
Oh, now I'm crying. All right, let's call it there for part 2 of our set review. If there's any cards you think we should talk about more that we missed, please let us know in the comments down below. We'll be back next week with part 3 of our set review covering gold, lands, and artifacts. A reminder that the day this episode comes out, this episode should be coming out on October 1st. That night, Wheeler and I will be playing Paper Magic on the Canadian... Wait, pardon me. Paper Canadian Magic, Canadian Highlander Magic. Oh my God.
I mean, all of these were correct, technically.
All the words are correct. The order is wrong. On the Loading Ready Run Twitch channel. So 5 p.m. PST, twitch.tv/Loading Ready Run. 3 hours of hopefully Wheeler just getting absolutely trounced by me in Magic, as is, traditionally how these things go down.
Where do I place bets?
You just hand me the money and don't worry about it.
All right.
Sorry, we don't condone gambling on this podcast unless by that you mean the second entomb.
Thank you very much for watching. A reminder that this podcast is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. I've been Serge, joined by Jer and Wheeler. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.